Hello, I am Reverend Irene Smith, and I'd like to welcome you to Generationally Speaking. Here at the table, we come and we discuss life issues, no matter what they might be. As we sit at the table with each generation, we all learn, we all grow, we all are inspired.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Generationally Speaking.
Hello, I am Reverend Irene Smith, and let me welcome you to Generationally Speaking. As we sit at the table of all generations and we talk to each other, and in our conversation, we learn and we grow and we become better. Again, when we take our inspiration and we get some information, transformation occurs. Well, last week I was talking to you about opposition. I talked about the three types of opposition: overt, covert, and unspoken opposition. This week, I want to talk about how we respond to opposition. What do we do? And the first question I want for us to wrestle with is, why do people have opposition towards certain ideas or beliefs? Why do people have opposition towards certain ideas or beliefs? We've seen it playing out now when it comes to women. The Southern Baptist Convention has said, women can't have any authority within their church confines. And then we've seen other churches who have disagreed or opposed, spoken in opposition against this belief. We've seen on the political scene the opposition when it comes to women who are childless, who have not born any children. And we've seen statements made about how they should be treated and how they should be viewed. Couples who don't have children. We've seen the opposition of people talking about that. The opposition of persons who decide, for whatever reason, they do not want to have children. And we ask ourselves, why do people have opposition towards certain ideas or beliefs? Well, I believe that it comes from our learning. It comes from our backgrounds, how we were raised. It comes from what we have ingested over the years and chewed up and believed it to be truth. So that's how we come to these places of opposition towards certain beliefs or ideas, because oftentimes we are just uninformed, unlearned, and undisciplined in being able to hear other people beliefs that don't agree or align with ours. So why do people have opposition? Because of the way they've been taught, perhaps their experience in their foundational years in their homes. They've gone maybe to churches that have preached certain doctrines and principles, and they accepted it. And the other reason is sometimes we have failed to be like the Bereans and go out and dig for ourselves, go out and get discernment for ourselves and ask the Lord to show us. So that's how people come with certain, in opposition towards certain ideas and beliefs. And it's very difficult to turn that thinking around, because people believe that you are attacking them. And sometimes it is personal. They believe you're attacking them personally, when actually it's an attack on the idea or belief that you're holding on to, and not you personally, but it's received as a personal attack. And so we have to be careful, because when people have been raised in a certain environment and raised to believe certain things, it is difficult for you and I to turn that thought around. And it goes to ourselves as well. What are our ideas? What are our beliefs? We've got to examine ourselves. And where did it come from, these thoughts? When it comes to our thinking on the LGBTQ community, what are our thoughts? Not what we heard on the radio, not what we've seen on the television, not what we heard somebody spout out, but what are our thoughts? And I think that's important. And I think we go back to God's word, and he tells us that we're all created equal in his sight. And there are some nuances that perhaps we don't understand. But that's how we get to these places. And when we get to these places, this opposition, if we're not careful, it can be heightened to a place where it creates violence. And that's what we want to avoid is violence. We want to be the type of person that God's called us to, that we can sit at the table with anybody and everybody and hear them and still espouse to them our beliefs and our principles without injury to that person, that we can share with them in a way that they can receive, in a way that we can receive, because we all have emotions, we all have feelings, and we have to be mindful of that. And then the next question would be, how can I effectively communicate with someone who has opposing views? How can I effectively communicate with someone who has opposing views? Now, that's a hard one right there, because if a person is stuck in what they believe, if a person is not open and receptive to hearing another person's perspective or another perspective, if a person is not open to a dialogue, then it's very hard to have that conversation. So when you have that conversation with the person, you have to learn how to be a good listener, first of all, because you can't effectively communicate if you're not listening to what they're saying. Maybe you want a pen and paper or something that you can jot down what they're saying, and you can ponder it, what they're saying, before you start thinking about a response to it. Now, good listening means I'm listening to what you're saying, and I'm not listening to automatically oppose you, but I'm listening. I'm listening, that I'm taking in, and I'm evaluating point by point what you're saying, and I'm listening to it, and I'm hearing you. So when to effectively communicate with someone who has opposing views, first of all, if they're not willing to sit and listen, and they're not willing to sit and have a dialogue, not a monologue, but a dialogue, then it's very hard, if not impossible, to have effective communication. You know, effective communication is important in a marriage. It's important when we have children, that we can sit down and we can hear them, and then we can share with them, not just do what I say do. Not that's a monologue. A dialogue is hearing them and then responding to what they've said in a polite and professional way, and allowing yourself to give your points or your perspectives. Now, when we communicate with our children, we have to make sure that we communicate with everybody else. We communicate on the level that they are on. I think I said something there. If you were speaking to a 6-year-old, you cannot speak to them or communicate with them as if they were a 11-year-old. If you're speaking to a coworker, then you have to speak to them as a coworker and not one of your children. You have to speak to them as an equal peer. And that becomes important. Effective communication, because you're going to communicate on the level of this relationship. And if you don't do that, it's a disrespect, and the communication will not be effective. It will not be received. Then, what are some of the strategies for handling opposition in a professional setting? I think that's such a great question. What are some strategies for handling opposition in a professional setting? And that professional setting includes being inside the walls of an office building or interacting with vendors outside of the office, um, interacting with prospective clients or clients. Those are professional settings, and how you interact with how the strategies that you put in place are going to be effective and important in order to build those relationships, to continue to establish those relationships. First of all, you want to make sure that you are always respectful. If you're cutting off the person in mid-sentence, that's not respectful and you're not hearing them. If everything that they're saying you are discarding or you're making light of, that's not a strategy for effective communication. But a strategy means that you are willing to listen, that you're making notes, and that you understand this is your peer, and that you all have to find some middle ground in which to agree. There's got to be some middle ground on which you all can agree in order to move forward. It can't always be my way or no way. There's got to be some middle ground. And you have to be prepared to give a sound business reasoning for your response, not because it's just the way I want to do it or this is the way it's always been done. No, no, no. That's so when you're sitting down with the person, you got to make sure also that you are in the right mindset, that you are ready to hear, that you're not going to pop off, that you're going to be professional in your interaction. Sometimes we know that certain persons, they can bring out of us a characteristic, anger or frustration, and we have to be careful that when we interact with these individuals, that we are mindful of that and that we tap that down so that it doesn't get in the way of my strategy. It doesn't get in the way of my communication. And then we have to make sure that we don't find ourselves becoming frantic in these conversations, that we don't find ourselves becoming overwhelmed in these conversations. We have to make sure that we make space that, hey, let's take a break. We've been talking about this. We don't seem to be getting anywhere. Let's go take a break. Let's take a coffee break. Let's go for a walk. Let's whatever it might be, taking a break from this conversation and then coming back and sitting down and then asking yourself the strategy. Where are the likeness? Where do we agree? Writing those things down, that's a strategy for effective communication. Where do we agree? And then where do we disagree? And then examining those areas of disagreement to find out, when you've delved down into them, to find out why these agreements exist. Those are effective strategies for handling opposition, because when you're in a professional setting, you always want to make sure, and even when you're not, you want to make sure that you're on your P's and Q's, as they would say. You want to make sure that you are conducting yourself in a manner in which you would be satisfied with 2 days from today, from that interaction. You don't want to blow up and blow off. You want to be able to sit and listen. And when you find yourself getting heated, and you know it, when you find yourself feeling like, okay, I'm getting overwhelmed here, ask, can we take a break? Go to the bathroom, go someplace and so that you can calm yourself down. That you can calm yourself down. So there are many other strategies for handling opposition, but the most important one is when you go in to this meeting or this setting, wherever it might be, that you have the right mindset, that you know that you're ready to hear, that you're ready to listen. so that you're ready to hear, you're ready to listen, and you're ready to respond in a professional way. And then we ask the question, how can I navigate relationships with friends or family members who have opposing political beliefs? Wow. We're in a space now where that's an excellent question, because we have these dynamics now in our political discord, where maybe we are oceans. Maybe we used to be streams apart, but now we're oceans apart. And when we come to our family gatherings, our family picnics, our family reunions, our family Thanksgiving and Christmas dinner, we don't want the turkey flying across the table. We don't want the Christmas tree being tossed out the window. But we want to make sure that we respect and honor each other. So now, because we're talking about family and friends, it's a different dynamics than professional. These are family and friends. So with family and friends, we already know a lot about the person. We already know their personality. We already know their temperament. We already know what it takes for them to lose it, to lose their composure. And so what we want to do is we want to make sure that we avoid certain conversations with different individuals, because we already know where it could end up, and why impact the entire family when we don't have to. And so when we are around family and friends, we have to make sure that we say to each other, look, we're not going to talk about that, because you got your camp and I got my camp. And so we're not going to bring that into the family dynamics. We're just going to respect each other for your beliefs, and we're going to keep it moving. But then, if a person asks you, but if the person presses you and asks you, you can find a succinct answer and give it to them in such a way that it does not attack them, but it responds to the very issue or principle that you are standing on. Okay, but you don't want to tear the family up over a political beliefs. You want to make sure that we learn to honor and respect each other. Why? Because there are other children who are listening. There are other children who are tuning in, and they are paying attention to how we act. And we'll see that interaction from them. So we want to be careful about that. Then the question is asked, what are some common reasons for opposition to social justice movement? Well, social justice movement has to do with historical basis of where we have been and where we are going. And so when we talk about social justice, there's a lot of misunderstanding when it comes to social justice. When people talk about defunding various organizations, they understand from their perspective, and perhaps their perspective is not an accurate depiction of what is being said. So when social justice movement also means to some people that it's an unfair disadvantage over one group to another. That's just not the case, but that's how it's viewed. So this social justice movement, we have to be careful to make sure that we properly explain and align what we are saying when we use these terms, because we can use terminology, and if we don't give a definition, people assign their own definitions, and sometimes the assignment of their own definition may not be exact as to what you're saying when it comes to social justice. So for some, social justice is justice for everyone. But there is perhaps a group, an issue that is negatively impacting one group of Americans over another. And that's that we get into social justice. The next question is, how can I stay open-minded and consider different perspectives when faced with opposition? Well, staying open-minded is a decision that you have to make. Nobody else can make that decision but you. You know that when you're being closed-minded, and when you're being open-minded. When you're being open-minded, you're willing to hear what's uncomfortable. You're willing to hear what's uncomfortable. And oftentimes it's uncomfortable. You're willing to hear what perhaps you've never not been taught, and you just didn't know. you're being open-minded to be receptive to what people are showing you, facts, and then taking that information and allowing yourself to think about it, to dissect it, to mull it over, and to see, is there truth? Is that something that I just never was taught, or I just never realized it? I thought everybody, I made the assumption that everybody received the same type of treatment. I didn't know. So it's being open-minded and considering different perspectives. When you talk to persons with different thoughts when it comes to um, um, sexual preferences, you have to be open-minded to hear. Not that you are going to agree with it, but you are open-minded to hear their perspective. So being open-minded. The next question is, what role does cognitive dissonance play in opposition to new information or ideas? Well, our cognitive dissonance has set up residence inside of us, and it has dictated how we receive and how we accept certain information. And so all of this goes back to being open-minded. And it's not always easy because over the years we've been taught a certain way. Over the years we've been thinking a certain way. And oftentimes maybe we perceived other people as receiving favor uh, when they should not have. Perhaps over the years we've seen people we thought the doors were open for them more easily than it was open for us. Over the years, perhaps we thought that they got a break that nobody else got a break because maybe of their skin color. But but we don't really go back, and our cognitive dissonance doesn't take us far enough back sometimes to understand the historical narrative. And when we look at the historical narrative, we have to look at the historical narrative as it is and not the way we want it to read. Because historical narrative is sometimes difficult to read. Our historical narrative has to go beyond what we have experienced, beyond our environment, beyond our history. It has to go beyond that, because if it doesn't, we don't have a clear picture of the historical narrative. And then the next question is, how can I effectively challenge and address opposition without causing conflict? Well, I think anytime you begin to address um, a narrative or challenge a principle or a belief, that you're going to get some people that who are going to receive that as you're going to cause some conflict. I think that part is just unavoidable. You're going to cause some conflict because the conflict comes as a result of you saying that I'm in disagreement with this. I believe that there's a wider narrative that we need to hear. And anytime you bring that up, you're going to cause some conflict. Now, conflict doesn't have to uh, come to a place where you all are screaming and hollering at each other. Conflict doesn't have to come to the point where you exchanging blows with each other. Conflict doesn't have to come to a place where you stop speaking to each other. But conflict can come to the place where you say, well, I respectfully disagree with what you say, and so we'll move on. And so you don't hold that against the person. It's just their thoughts. It's your thoughts, and that's how you move forward with that. What are some common misconceptions or stereotypes that lead to opposition towards certain groups? People, if we have not been in a community where we have interacted with persons of different ethnic backgrounds, then we might be stereotyped by what we've seen on TV. We might be stereotyped by what we heard friends say. We might be stereotyped by the way we've seen them treated. We might be stereotyped by thinking that it's not accurate about certain ethnic groups. And so until we learn more about people and their thoughts, I think we should always remain open. Uh, a Muslim brother or sister is a Muslim brother or sister. If you don't know a lot about their faith, then learn more about their faith before you start to make condescending statements, before you start to make stereotypical statements. Learn more about the person. Allow yourself to be open. Don't just start, popping off and saying things, spouting out rhetoric that you've heard over and over that may not have any truth to it at all. And then my last question is, how can I effectively engage in constructive dialogue with someone who has opposing views on a controversial topic? Well, when my kids come over, they have opposing viewpoints on controversial topics, and they all share their perspective. And at the end of it, they agree to disagree, or maybe one or two will change their mind from where they were initially. But I think it's always important that we be respectful. That we be respectful. Opposition, covert, overt, and unspoken, or overt, convert, and unspoken, however you want to place it. But opposition does not mean that we have to go to battle. Opposition simply means that you're meeting someone with a different perspective. Opposition does not have to be personal. It does not. It simply means this is where a person believes, and that's where they're standing based on what they've been taught, what they've learned, what they have accepted. Doesn't make it truth. No matter that it makes it truth on your side. But this opposition, what we do with opposition, we want to make sure that we don't allow it to destroy us. We want to make sure that we don't allow it to divide us. We want to make sure that we don't allow it to misalign us. But we want to make sure that we, in opposition, that we are respectful to each other, that we hear each other, and we agree to disagree. Hey, see you next week. And whatever you do, be inspired. And in your inspiration, get some information. And if you got inspiration and information, transformation is going to take place. God bless.